Welcome to Frequently Speaking. This is your host, Maxwellness. Now, here on this podcast, we're going to start to break down words that we speak outwardly and how their vibrations create what we frequently see. Now, in today's episode, we're going to delve into the perfect product. Welcome to another episode of Frequently Speaking. It's your host, Maxwellness, and we are here with another one. And this one is for all the people that feel like they are in that transitional state of procrastinating. If you feel like you're a victim of procrastination, self-worth, the pressure of productivity, this episode is going to be for you. If you've ever thought, I just need to do more, if you ever thought productivity does not equal value, this one is going to be worth waiting out for. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about what our three main pillars are that are within ourself that can shift these habits of perfectionism to help to dissolve that so that we can see procrastination for what it really is and how it's rooted in self-worth, not time management. We're also going to be discussing how that sense of perfectionism starts to feed our avoidance cycles. And again, we're going to be breaking this down in a 4-part framework, looking at belief, behavior, habit, and action, and different ways that we can dissolve that. A few other things that we're going to be talking about is the neuroscience between rewiring productivity patterns with compassion and also clarity, because our neuroplasticity and the way that our body works and how we bring in habits and behaviors, this is what's going to allow us to connect to that spiritual belief and create that human action. Now, the last thing that we're going to actually discuss in this is how we can actually create imperfect movement that actually feels good. So within all of this, we're really breaking down this idea and this myth of procrastination. For me, I used to be a chronic procrastinator, but I have hence recovered, and now I do not procrastinate. I just delegate things to my future self. And I like that reframe because it helps me see that sense of value in all the things that I am as a creative, no matter what I produce. So I'm feeling less of that push and that pressure from the procrastination, and I can see these broken down steps of shifting my patterns and feeling that natural flow of creativity to allow it to flow through me, rather than looking at how that perfectionism can keep you so analytical and so critical on the things that you are doing that you never actually get it done. Now, isn't this the vicious cycle of a creative? Isn't the vicious cycle of just being a human? So within this episode, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into how to rewire procrastination through belief, behavior, habit, and action. Let's get started. So I want to start off just by saying that if you ever feel like you're stuck, like you're waiting for the perfect moment to start or finish something, you're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just likely caught in a deeper loop of beliefs that are tied to your worth. Now, I say this to say that this presence of where we're at now, nowadays, we have so much focus on what you're producing, what you're creating, what you're doing, what work is, and these ideas of what we actually connect to, what we're actually saying. This is what Frequently Speaking is all about, because the words that we actually use, we don't necessarily have the time and the environment to really look at the relationship that we've actually cultivated with the feeling behind the word, with the frequency behind the word. So when we're looking at words like work, when we're looking at words like produce, when we're looking at words like creation, what is it that you actually relate to this? Because when we place those feelings within time, and I know that, we all have goals, we have deadlines, we have things we need to meet. If you're at work, there's a certain tone, you might have, a lot of tension, or if you're around your mother, you might feel a little bit more rushed, or if you feel your father, you feel like a lot of pressure to be like super great. So all of these different things have a reaction and also sometimes a response on our central nervous system. So I want to get into the neuroscience behind that a little bit later, but I do want to share just a short story about the framework that we're going to be looking at. So the framework is really a 4-step process that I began to see that was within us, so that we can start to create a little bit more space within ourselves and also see how we are enacting these ripples into our life in a process of creation. Now, it does have a semblance, or let's say correspondence, to God as well. Because when we're looking at our actions in the physical, we're here having a human experience, but how do we bridge that internal aspect, or that higher aspect of the God in ourself, or the God self, to this human? How do we harmonize that? How do we see that there is a process of how this information, how these feelings, how this energy, how the emotionality, all of it comes into one? How can we create a container around it? So by looking at this process, we're looking from the inside of us all the way into the outside, and then we're also going to be looking from the outside to the inside. Now, imagine yourself inside, right? Like you have your core, almost like a world, right? And it has all these different layers of, sediment and such, right? You have all these different layers, like an onion. That's a better analogy there. So if that inner core aspect of ourself, actually, you know what? I want to start from the outside. Let's look at as if we're peeling this onion, right? Because now it's looking like an onion to me. For me, it started out like a planet, like a world. But let's go with an onion. So you look at an onion, you see this outer layer, right? That is what you are doing on the outside. You're seeing the actions. So that outside layer is your actions. It's the things that you're doing. It's, you typing up things. It's you taking out the trash. It's you eating that next cookie, whatever it may be. It's the action that you're actually performing. This comes in a lot with the physical body. So the physicality of it. There's many other things that really connect to what our actual habit is, which is going to be, when we look deeper past that action, we're looking at the consistency of that action. So now we peel back that first layer of action, and then what do we have? We have the layer of our habit. So now that habit is the consistency that we are doing. So let's stick with one analogy of taking out the trash. No, because that's a completely, no. We're going to go with a different one. Let's go with going to the gym. So our action, right, is lifting our weights, or, doing our Pilates, or doing our yoga, whatever it is, right? We're doing exercise, we're doing our movement. That's the action of it. Now, the habit is the consistency of it. If you're going once a week, if you're going once a month, if you're going 5 times a week, that is the habit. So now you're already in this habit, and it's a set frequency. It's how consistent you are doing it, how many times, and then that tone there creates that action. So I know that, okay, it's Monday at, 8 o'clock in the morning, I need to go to my Pilates class. And then your body performs the action because that habit, that tone is already set. So this is where we look at how we build habits. So we're always trying to look at how can we break a habit? How can we shift a habit? Or how can we create another habit? We have to set a tone for that. So before I get too deep into that, I'm going to break down all of these different steps also in this process, and also how it responds in our body, and also how to unwind what state you are actually in right now, in a sense of judging these different frames. Now, when we peel back that layer of habit, we get to that third layer, which is behavior, or rather that next layer, which is behavior. Now, I'm going to get into behavior a little bit later, but I want you to look at what the connection to these words is first. So you see behavior as, let's stick with going to move. So our behavior in creating that consistency is, do I get up an hour before my movement or my class and prepare the things that I need to so that I can go into class nice and calm? Or am I that person that gets up 10 minutes before my class and rushes to class? That is the behavior. It is almost like the quality of that consistency, the quality of that tone, the quality of that rhythm that you're setting. So it's the quality. It's almost like the shirt of that habit that you put on, it's the texture to it. So now when we're looking at that, we go back one more layer and we peel back that behavior, and then we look at something that is at our deepest core, which is our belief. Now, a belief is a thought that is chronic, a thought that is held over time, over space, that you have held for so long that this becomes your reality. Because we all know that thought, meaning the mind, not like you thinking, it's this thought that comes in, and if you consistently think that, then that is what your reality will create. That is like that ripple that will go out. So it becomes your belief. It becomes what it is to be. Now, let's take that same analogy. If I'm that person that gets up an hour before and preps and makes my shake and, takes my time, that thought of, okay, I have class at 8:00, let me wake up at 6:30, because I know myself, because I don't want to rush. I want to go into class easy. I value this thing. I'm doing it for this process. It's setting a level of tone of how you value it. And that is really what belief comes down to. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. So if I'm this person that wakes up 5 minutes before and I'm rushing, what I believe is that this is how I am creating, and this is how I create. This is who I am. That's what I believe. Because that thought that is within you that, okay, I have class, but I'm not really holding, or I don't have this valuable, or I don't hold this class or this exercise or this movement as high as a value that I would be able to prepare for it. I'm not looking to do that, because that's not me. That's what I believe. So with this framework, right, we can look at a different perspective of what this sense of building habits, building behaviors, but looking at the actions and the beliefs, and where we can actually step in to see where we're judging ourselves, talking about that we're procrastinating or we're not getting things done. Maybe it's something that's within this framework and within this process, where you can shift something. Maybe you can shift your belief. Maybe you can shift your behavior. Maybe you can shift a habit or your action. So in this podcast, this is what we're really going to be discussing, looking at, and breaking down. But I want to start off with procrastination. We all fear it, and we all know it lurks and looms within us. But what is it really that eats at us? It can't be the simple state that we aren't doing anything all day and getting little minuscule things done. It's really the route that we take to get there. That's where the judgment of procrastination comes in, because we're judging that it's not being done in this certain amount of time, or we have a deadline, so we're pushing it, and then we're getting distracted, and we're looking at this level of our natural flow to come out of that center and judging it, saying that we are a procrastinator, which starts to plant the seed for that belief. It's that we're completing things, but not in alignment with our picture productive life that's been painted for us. We're always told that we need to be doing things fast. The more fast, the more efficient, the more you get it done. And we start to become that rhythm to our environment. Now, there may be this pull to go and trim the hedges, take that kitchen appliance to get fixed, or even start that new exercise course that you purchased through Instagram. But instead, here you are, clipping your nails and organizing your shelf. This is procrastination. It's the action, but the habit underneath it is actually the habit to produce. You're producing, but not in the ways that you'd like. So when we're looking at the actions, we're just judging this as procrastination. But it's not really that. When we step into that next layer of our habit, we're looking at the judgment that we have of producing, how we are producing, what is the consistency. We're feeling that tone. We're also feeling the quality of what we're producing. And that's where it starts to get muddled and it starts to get skewed, because it tugs at that belief that is deep down underneath to say that you are a procrastinator, or that self-criticism. Now, I'm all for taking time, finding the rhythm, and honoring the flow with certain things. When this turns into using energy in smaller bite-sized ways, then I normally hear that little voice say, I'm not procrastinating, I'm delegating things to my future self. And I feel like this was a part of my coping mechanism to really see and also honor and accept this internal belief, so that I'm not necessarily self-criticizing, because that is a huge thing that I have within myself to keep myself on track. But this is where I start to know that I can take a look at the deeper belief that is present under this habitual snacking, fiddling, or carousing. It's a ripple effect coming from that deep core center to be made manifest. Belief, behavior, habit, action. This is that process. This is the alignment that comes from within all the way to without. Now, believing that we need to keep producing is not all bad if you understand how to produce. If the belief is based in a skewed value, a patterned habit, or disconnected inspired action, then we will manifest procrastination rather than production. When we are connected to this sense of passion or spirit in what we produce, we release from the pressure of it being done now, driving us to do little meaningless things that come to distract and dissolve our time, energy, and attention. I'm going to sip my tea. Now, I'm sure that you've probably felt that. If you're listening and you're in this far, you've definitely felt this sense of, okay, I'm doing something. I'm like producing something. I'm creating, and that is also a different shift of the word of producing something. It's really creation. When we tap into God didn't produce this world. He didn't produce the leaves, and he didn't produce the animals and produce the waters and all of these things. It was a process of creation. It was interaction. It was flow. It wasn't, distraction, because he went over here and, made an elephant and then was like, oh, I'm going to go, make a fly. It's completely different, but it's not distraction. So us as humans, we have this innate ability to judge and to have that lens. But really what I want to do here is looking at this process is how can we dissolve that lens of judgment and self-criticism to get down to what it is that we actually value that is at our deeper self. Because when we're self-criticizing and judging ourselves or putting all these pressures on, there's a fine line between inspired action and self-criticism. So this ripple comes from a mechanism that is programmed into the very fabric of what we are as humans. As we tap into our divine nature, you begin to tune things differently, understanding that it all starts with you. Now, let's look at the process of belief, behavior, habit, and action. So just as I said before, belief is a thought that is chronic. If you integrate that thought with feeling, you begin to have faith. Now, tie that to the fuel of emotions, and you will come to manifest anything. You come to manifest that energy that is in motion. You're taking that energy and you're placing it in motion because that faith is coming from inspired, being in spirit, action. It's coming full circle. You are in harmony with that ability to fathom and also the action. It's working synonymously. It's happening at the same time. Now, that takes a lot to get into when people just move completely off of faith, but we're looking at this process of belief. So taking that into consideration, the root of belief comes from the mind. I'll bet the higher, lower, subconscious, or unconscious. It doesn't matter. It's the waves of the mind that become consistent through time that you come to believe. Now, you have to understand that when I say mind, I mean thought. I mean the God sense, this etherical consciousness that is there. That is the mind. What we're thinking about, that is a completely different process, is the brain. So when you think of mind, connect that. The mind is to the soul as the brain is to the body. Let's say that. So when we look at these different minds, this higher mind, the lower mind, the subconscious, the unconscious, those are all very etherical. How they represent in our brain, that's what we can actually start to shift because it's held there like a consistent ping out into the reality that you call life. Whether it's a unconscious behavior, whether it's a subconscious habit, whether if it's coming from your lower mind to, do something out in the world that is nefarious, or if it's coming from your higher mind that's beckoning and calling you to your higher purpose. It's this little beacon, and we get to tap in or tune our brain to tap into that frequency. So that rhythm of consistent pinging builds your habits because it then starts to bend matter and attract things to you by altering your habit. By altering your habitat to suit the consistent thought. So now imagine that, like your brain, your body, your spirit, everything, the universe, which is you, is working in your favor. So that consistency of that ping starts to build a habit that expresses through you. But it's consistently altering that matter that is outside. It is going to shift how you are around people, what jobs you're around, how difficult you're going to feel or uncomfortable you'll feel in certain places, or when you're ready to outgrow somebody, or when you're ready to move, whatever it is, it starts to change the matter that's in your reality because you have this consistent thought that is in your mind. You ever notice when you start to work out a little bit more, or you make a little bit more money, or you start to get into a really good relationship, how everything around you shifts and changes? It's not everything around you, but it's you that's shifting it because it's your perspective. Now, say I believe drinking coffee in the morning wakes me up. Then I will have coffee in my house, or be sure that there's a good coffee shop on my way to work. This becomes made manifest in my environment, but still an internal expression echoing out. This is a little example of how we shift matter in a very elementary way, right? Because I have this deeper belief, and we're not there yet. I externalize it by creating that habit because I know that it is my habit to drink coffee because I would like to wake up in the morning. I would like to be more refreshed. I would like to be more focused. I would like to be whatever the case is. That's my habit. So then the action just happens naturally. I go make the coffee. I drink the coffee. It's that process. But when we look at it and we unravel it, we can see what is actually happening is that you start to alter your habitat. If you're not next to a coffee shop, you leave your house a little bit earlier to go do that, right? And this is what we're going to get into, because that tuning of the habitat starts to need feedback, which is how we respond, our behavior. Now, whether I wake up and go to the coffee pot first thing in the morning and have things prepared, or I head out the house 20 minutes early so that I can get to the coffee shop, order and walk to work, we start to plan ahead. So we're seeing that this becomes our behavior. This is the feedback that we get from our habitat. I'm gauging, okay, the coffee shop is, 8 minutes away. And I know they usually take 10 minutes because there's a lot of people in there. And then the lady in the morning, she becomes you become a regular. So it starts to create that, that habit. But now my behavior starts to shift because I'm giving feedback in a sense of, now I know that I have to leave a little bit earlier, or I know that I have to, wake up because it takes the coffee pot, 10 minutes to brew my cup, So I start to shift and change my behaviors so that I can start to see how I'm interacting with my habitat now that it's working in my favor to support my beliefs, to support my habits. And if that's something I want to change, then I have to change the whole thing. So this understanding, right, of how we start to alter and adapt to our abilities, that's our behavior. So we plan ahead. We become accustomed and begin factoring in the environment to our internal environment. It builds a character of how we tend to be. That's why it's the behavior, So that internal environment of what I believe that coffee is going to wake me up, I hold that as a high value. I value that to the point that I'm going to wake up, an hour earlier to go through my coffee ritual or to do these things. We start to alter our reality and we start to alter our actions and our habits so that we can be this way. And that's our behaviors. Now, lastly, when we take action as this character, our body has been holding that intangible thought turned belief, frequenting out into the environment, which tells us how to be so long that it just begins to do these actions. It programs itself because of the belief that is true, valid, or familiar. And as a natural organism does, we adapt. We adapt to that belief by saying we don't have time to meditate, exercise, or read, but the 20 minutes we have carved out in our life to make way for the belief that the coffee makes you function isn't even considered. So this is where I'm talking about self-value and self-worth, is that we place everything on a prioritized board. But nobody ever looks at that board because it's so overlooked, because we don't know the process of how our body is responding to these things. So when a task gets put on to our board, which is, I want to build that dresser that I've always wanted to build, or I wanted to paint that canvas that I always wanted to paint. We place it on a board and we don't even know where it's at on that board, because once we wake up in the morning, coffee is there, work is there, getting the kids ready, getting out the house, getting the car, setting up for a Zoom meeting, scheduling these things. Oh, you spilled coffee on your shirt. All of these things get thrown in there. And then we start to see, especially now that we have this neurodivergency, we have the sense of ADHD and all of these other diagnoses that may be rattling off in the back of your head, that you went to somebody or saw an Instagram video and said, oh, I really resonate with this. This is who I am. So that thought becomes in your head because you've identified it. Oh, I have ADD. I have attention deficit disorder. I'm not deficient in any attention. It's just I don't know where that board is at so that I can place my attention and prioritize it correctly, to say that when I'm looking to paint on that canvas, and I also have these tasks for work, and I also want to cook dinner, and I also need to do this, and then time just gets all disorganized throughout the day, And then you see something in the garbage and you get what you would call distracted. Then you start to self-criticize and say that this is procrastination. You're not doing enough. You're not producing. You can't stay focused. And then that self-talk starts to happen, because when we look at this process and we get down to the actual belief, and, we talk about belief systems and shifting your belief and all of that, I believe that that is the core, yes. But if that is just one end of the spectrum and the rest of the string is tangled up, then we're never going to be able to untangle it, because we can correct that root or try to tune it, But if the rest of the string is still untangled, if the rest of the string is still tangled, then we really can't get through to it. We really can't let it harmonize as we need to. So in that adaptation, right, it's the behavior of adapting to this belief that begins to shape the days that become our week and the moments that become how we produce in our life. So you see this as it's a compounding, and I can get really deep and go into the Fibonacci sequence, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it semi-light. But you see how these compounding behaviors, these compounding habits, and these compounding actions happen over time because we adapt to that belief. But if we can't get through the action, the habit, and the behavior, we never can shift the belief. Some people can do, they can shift that belief and just see it and just say, okay, I'm just gonna change that, and I don't believe that anymore. I feel sometimes that is a little bit more difficult. But if you are a person that notices and is very aware of your self-criticism or your procrastination or your judgment or all these things, then this is something that you can really look at to see how your adaptation is a good thing, but it also has a shadow side of how you can be adapting unconsciously. Now, the real question in the weighing of importance of coffee to reading isn't the matter. It's the ability to pry ourselves from that belief that it's the reason why you don't have time. But it's really, you do, but the time management holds the coffee at a higher value than the reading. So let me run that by you again. When we're sitting there and we're saying, somebody, you get the thought, I wanted to read that book, or it's the end of the day and go, oh my gosh, I didn't even, go paint, or I didn't give any time to play my instrument, or whatever it is that you may seem that is of value because your soul is speaking to you now, that your mind is slowing down. Then you see it come up. The excuse that your mind gives is, oh, well, you don't have time. Or even in the moment, not even at the end of the day, you may get the gist to say, hey, I want to go do this thing. And you don't have the time. Or, hey, you want to go to the lake this weekend? Oh, you don't have the time. When that's not really the truth. The truth is really that we don't want to look at ourselves and shift our belief because it takes too much energy. And the ego doesn't want to do that. Because just like we said in the beginning with that tea, we're consistently protecting, preserving, and looking where to pour that tea, that time, that energy, and that attention. But when we're living in that direction, the time comes first and the energy comes second and that attention comes last. We're always just going to be sipping that tea, and the tea gets cold after a while. And maybe this is going into too much analogies, but I have a course that is called Plenty. And, well, it's plenty to pour, but we look at how we can place our time, energy, and attention, our energy, time, and attention, our attention, time, and energy in different ways that we can shift and leverage our energy and just our irreplenishable resources. Because in this truth that we have here of you don't have time, it really is that you do. It's just that we haven't managed the time correctly. Because these other things where I do have that 20 minutes that I wake up early so I can get to my coffee and prepare to my coffee because I believe that coffee wakes me up. That is a dependence on something outside. But if I say I can take that 20 minutes and also that 10 minutes that I'm taken to drink my coffee or whatever, and trade that 30 minutes to just go sit in front of my canvas and paint for 30 minutes and feel that inspiration and feel that release of doing something that I hold of value to myself, I don't see that as more valuable than the coffee. So when it comes time to work or your creative projects, we don't ask the real question. Why do I think that this thing here needs to be produced, and why now? We question or blame sometimes the fault of our character in that we have developed a character that is a procrastinator. We allow that character to live so that we can have justification of you're a producer. You're meant to produce. Your self-value, your self-worth is meant on producing. So if you're not producing in this way and right now and this fast, then I'm going to blame you. You become the procrastinator. So we consistently are trying to run from this identity that we've created of doing something that is of value to you, going and painting that picture or playing that instrument. We see that as being a procrastinator. We put that all in a box and we create that identity because that's a character, when in actuality, it's the relationship to how or what you believe production should be. Now, we can go into where that relationship came in, but that is up to you. I'm going to leave that up to you to do on your own, to see what your relationship with production is, where it came from, where it was conditioned, all of those good things, because everybody's story is different. There's a set production list in our day. And for some reason, making sure all the clothes are hung up and the dryer filter is clean, like right now, is at the top of it. We think that there is an urgency to produce without discerning the value of what we are producing. It could be because we are the product. But what is the value of you? Have you ever been pushed and guilted by your level of productivity? I'm sure that these questions stir up a lot. But when you really ask and really answer truthfully, or listen to the answer truthfully of what is the value of you, is it really about your production? I think for me, when I looked at the level of productivity, I started to unwrap the layers of where I learned it for myself, and how my mom taught me how to go out and get it, and I was selling lemonade at 6 years old and 7 years old so I can go buy Pokemon cards. And I was always taught to lean into my creative ways of producing what I wanted to create. But then when I also started to peel back other layers that were within my grandfather, that were within my mother, that were within my ancestors, and just growing up as an African-American man in America, and that story of slavery, and that story of working so hard, and that story of, if you didn't produce this amount of cotton or your quota of sugar cane at the end of the day, that you were going to be punished. Like, it's all of these things of how slavery, or this sense of work, gets placed upon your back. And I'm talking about subtle energies now of these paradigms and these beliefs that we go into in ceremony and in spirituality. We look at these subtle energies of what is that subtle voice that may be echoing from your ancestors' past, conditions that were past lives, whatever it may be. It's a very subtle ripple in the water, but it doesn't mean that your soul isn't receiving it, because your soul is receiving everything, because everything is happening at the same time. It's happening simultaneously. So in your belief system today, sometimes that feeling or that guilt or that shame or that pressure can feel like a push, because your level of productivity is starting to slow down more. So if you're inviting yourself into more ease, that means that you're becoming more sensitive. So you're going to start to feel those subtle energies that come up. And if you're interested in that, you can definitely reach out to me, and we can talk a little bit more about ceremony and looking at the rituals that you can do to develop those sensitivities. But to stay in this sense of productivity and looking at these frameworks, we start to see that there's a connection to value, right? Like if I value something more, I put it at the top of my task list because it needs to get done now. Like it's higher urgency. Things at the bottom are like, low hanging fruit. It's not really that important. I can get to that later. But it's also a reflection of our intrinsic value. And intrinsic value is based on what we internally believe within ourselves. I say, okay, this is the most important to me. I need to get this done because I've been pushing it off. And we start to create the momentum behind it. We say, okay, this is number one on my to-do list. But as we have grown and come into this world and all its experiences, we tend to see the value standard based on a set level of production. Meaning that as we're experiencing this world and as we start to grow up, we start to see everybody else's task list and we start to see their standards for what value is and what production is. And if we're not producing as much as the next kid that's next to us, then we're going to, be at the back end of the class, or, we're going to be we're not going to really be up for that promotion. So where is that? There's different sets of value for different environments. But what I want to look at in this whole discussion is how you can anchor into your own. Because those outside environments, when you step into there, we start to lose that center of value. And this is where you start to bring in the self-criticism, or you start to compare yourself. And the fact that if you aren't producing proper results, you're of no value. And this is not true. This does not belong in your belief system. So whether we allow this paradigm to shift us is up to us as an individual. But also, how much are you compounded by? Like over time, over space, how much are you compounded by? Just given the past 100 years, there's been deep encoding within biological DNA, which is presented as an expression, as the persona that we have attached to. We see this in diagnosis of ADHD, narcissism, perfectionism or neurodivergency, and anxiety. But nobody's really giving an explanation as to what these diagnoses are. And this is something I was talking about with the neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity, in short, it's how we learn, how we can bend and mold and shape our mind or our thought process to bring in thoughts. It's like, and then it goes into muscle memory and habits and all of these different things. So in this framework, right, of actions, habits, behaviors, and belief, when we look at that, how does that look on a neurological level and also biological level? How does our body enact those actions? How does our neurology shift those behaviors? How does our energy set those habitual tones? And how does our spirit allow those beliefs? How does our mind, our brain process those beliefs? Because it's really just an externalization into the world. So now when we see this narcissism, when we see this ADHD, we see it just as a representation of what is inside. So now when I go to the doctor, when I go to my therapist and they tell me I have ADD, I have ADHD, I have anxiety, I have neurodivergency, I have all of these things, they identify it for you, which creates an identity. And because we trust, because it resonates, because the information is so aligned, it backs this identity and creates a container for all of that energy to go into that belief, which starts to create your behavior, which starts to create the habit, which starts to create that action. And yes, there is a level of acceptance. Yes, there is a level of understanding and all of these different things. But the missing key point is, how do we undo and detach from that identity? Because what it is that keeps us in that paradigm, or rather, let me rephrase that into a question. What is it that keeps us in this paradigm, and how do we shift out of it as a collective? Because as we're collectively seeing that multiple people have this neurodivergency, multiple people have anxiety, multiple people have ADHD, whatever it is, we start to enable that identity, and that identity in us being adaptive, we start to try to adapt everybody else to our neurodivergency, which enables and perpetuates that identity. So you remain neurodivergent. I'm hoping that this is making sense. So as a collective, how can we bring in more consciousness and information and knowledge and wisdom to really unravel these identities, so that we learn not just our attachment styles, and we're a secure attachment and a anxious avoidant and all of these things, and adhere to that identity, but also our detachment styles. Now, I have another podcast completely about that, but that is totally different. That is something that I exercise in my therapeutics and with my sessions, is really to identify these things, but see them just as an identification tool, not an identity to adhere to. Now, as the times go on, there comes the point of view that we must break from this psychological, social, and ancestral chains of belief that our value is based in our production. I call this intentful performance. And this is from wherever we can and choose to be in. Now, this determines the positioned role that we take on in the worlds that we create. Some choose to go through it, numb it, ignore it, or even subscribe to the belief as a healthy way of life. So this really looks at placing an intent on the way that we perform these beliefs, the way that we numb ourselves with TV, social media, drugs, sex, food, whatever it may be. That is our relationship with the belief that we have that is deeper, that we have yet to set an intent to actually listen to unravel the action, to unravel that habit, to unravel that behavior, so that we can see the true belief that lies underneath and what fuels it. Now, the same way those beliefs come from the inside, like a frequency, like we spoke about, so can they be penetrated from the outside by frequency. Now, this is where we talk about influence, right? And when I spoke about the subtle body a little bit earlier, this is something that I break down in my book, Human Being. And it's looking at the body on different levels and different layers, and this is what I want to talk about, is the subtle body and influence. So when we look outside, right, and let's say, for example, you're watching Instagram, something gets you viscerally attached to this video, that you see somebody gardening and they create this DIY project and it looks so cool and it's something you always wanted to do, and it's like, oh my God, that's so great, like I really wanted to do that. That subtle body is being affected because it is your thought. It is a thought wave that you're receiving in through your sight, and it sparks that thought. But also neurologically, our body and our brain does not know that this influence is real or fake, but it does know, and it can identify if this connection is from a human, because what it does is you exert dopamine, but not oxytocin. And the difference between those two, oxytocin, you have a more human to human connection. It's that true, genuine feeling of connection, and it lasts a lot longer, like between a mother and a child. And that dopamine is just really a chemical that is right now, and it's by that influence, and it's very short-lived. And this is why they speak about, or you may hear, oh, you get this dopamine hit from social media, or the likes, or whatever the case is. It's very superficial. So it's conditioning those beliefs And in my book, this is where I speak about the different levels of our body and how to approach them and how to build those relationships back with them. Because it's a frequency that if we do not know how to preserve those levels of our body, we don't know how to learn how to speak those languages, to put up those boundaries, or to place those filters, as I like to call them, then that is where those outside frequencies can enter into your field to become influenced. Now, it's the same way you think about it when you get sick, right? But though this can be helpful, healthy is more about the residual effects of the mind, body, and spirit. Influence from your environment injects into your consciousness, right? Like it's almost like a shot. But being with this influenza, as deep as you will let it be within your person, that's how far it will enter you. So just like you wouldn't go outside with your head wet and, your neck exposed into the cold, because you know that your body will be influenced by whatever outside germs. If you're putting a mask on when you go into the subway or when you go around people, it's because you do not want to be infected. And this is what the part of the environment injects into your physical, biological being. Now, how does that happen on a conscious level? Now, how can somebody inject or influence my thoughts? It's because it's working at a subtle level. Your thoughts are a frequency. It's a radio wave, or that's how we can look at it. It's a brain wave, but it's a wave. It's a wave of light. It's a wave of sound. It's a wave of frequency. And just because we might not be able to hear that frequency or see that sound or see that wave doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Just like you can't see the little bacteria that get into your throat and get you sick. It's the same exact way. Now, the good thing is that doors open up both ways in this perspective. Practice is what keeps us from becoming products ourselves and allows us the free thinking, freedom to produce naturally without any side effects. These practices keep us forming those beliefs. It keeps us in that action to shift our behaviors, to shift our habits, to keep strumming that string so that it doesn't ravel up with that influence of outside influence. Now, in my book, Human Being, I explain these bodies and how they function and the different ways that we can approach opening and closing those doors, whilst also setting clear beliefs that serve you from your true center, free of pressure and influence condition. A way to start shifting a production mindset is to affirm this. Progress is better than perfection. Now, yes, affirmations are really great to the body. They're really great to the mind, because our brain doesn't, it's difficult for it to think about 2 or 3 different things at the same time and stay focused on it. So this was an affirmation that really helped me shift that understanding of I can continue to progress without procrastination and save myself that procrastination judgment or criticism, because it's better than that perfection, because I know that in every moment there's a level of bringing in acceptance that everything is perfect. But I also understand that there's progress in this and that I do have to work towards something until I say it's okay and detach from it. I like to look at this as from a natural standpoint. And have you ever planted a tree? If you've planted a tree and actually seen it mature, or planted a fruit and seen it mature, vegetable, whatever the case is, once you harvest it, it's let me ask you this. Do you harvest it as soon as it bears the fruit? No, right? And just as the fruit is no longer a part of the tree when you do harvest it, they both still maintain their anonymity with what and how they came into being. They both came from that seed, but it was this process of habit consistency, the behavior of the plant, and you are the one that created the conditions and the environment to influence that plant. If you kept giving it water, if you had exposed to it to enough sun and spoke to it and send it loving vibes and all of these things, that same vibration, that same frequency is going to go into the plant. But at the same time, that plant is continuously growing. And once it starts to produce that fruit, just like you are producing that fruit of your art, your job, whatever it may be, your projects, your creations, your food that you're cooking, whatever it might be, you don't pluck that, or when somebody plucks that at their own time, then that's how you know that you are being harvested for your fruit before you can actually allow it to mature naturally. And just as intelligent as you are, unique as you are, there may be similarity between our ancestors, society, family, and friends, but you still have your autonomy to subscribe to what you would like to produce as an individual human that is being, without the price tag set by them to tell its value. You're priceless, producing piece of perfection. Smile out loud and embrace your soul. If you like this episode and would like to explore more perspectives like this with me as we get a bit more intimate and intricate look into our internal vibrations, be sure to tune in to next week's episode and subscribe for more. Until then, keep frequently speaking what you frequently see.